What's up YouTube, my name is Birdman778 and welcome to another Devastator video. Today I'm talking about what might be the absolute best seismic build setup for Devastator to be able to clear solo gold CT15 expeditions. Now before we get into anything, I'll let you know I am probably streaming over on twitch.tv/Birdman778. I stream every single day starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I could be streaming right now for all you know. I don't know what time it is for you, but do know if you're on the East Coast, I am more likely streaming in the mornings. I go to about 2 p.m., 3 p.m. in the afternoon, but stop on by. Let's vibe out, hang out, have a good time. Also check out some of my other videos as well, covering some different Devastator builds, and also know that I can be found on Twitter, TikTok, and obviously on YouTube at Birdman778. Let's get on the video. So we've been going over a lot of these different build videos and kind of encompassing different things we feel like really fit for Devastator. And the one thing that has constantly come up that I feel is just the most important is that bottom tree bleed build. Now, before we get into the skill tree itself, we got to talk about our armor, weapons, and stuff like that. And when I say actually talk about weapons, I mean let's actually kind of forget about the weapons at this point. From what I have noticed, Devastator is kind of crutched by certain weapons that I've noticed from like other creators and stuff like that. They all tend to use kind of the same thing, that being like the Thunderbird, Death Shield, and the Air of the Desert tend to be some of the biggest ones. You're going to notice on all their builds, they're pretty much all using this. Unfortunately, I've been lucky enough to get this. I get like 3 landlubbers a day, a bunch of copies of different weapons. I had earlier today back-to-back Amber Vaults from Expos. So pretty frustrating stuff. I haven't been lucky enough to get it, but I've been able to create builds that are able to push me to that point where I'm able to CT solo gold expeditions by myself without having to have those crutchy weapons. Now, no, that's no shade or anything to anybody else, just saying those are kind of the meta, and I don't have the meta, so I'm actually having to push my builds to a point where I feel as though they're able to get to that spot. Now, we're looking at these weapons over here. We have the Funeral Pyre. I'm using it with Shadow Common Fortress, and then we also have the Juggler with Scrap Grenade and Shadow Common as well. I just ignore those. Those don't exist. Ignore them. We're going to talk about our mods and our armor that we are currently using for this build. First and foremost, this is a full seismic set. You're going to notice at the bottom we have that 5/3 equipped. The seismic set gives you increased damage towards enemies that have bleed by 50%. This is obviously really great because we're using a bleed build, so the more bleed, the better. Getting that passive damage from the mod, from the set itself is just really great for us. Now, first and foremost, we're using the Seismic Commander's Helmet. This one has Anomaly, Status, and Life Leech on it, and the 2 mods that I have currently equipped are Ultimate Impaler. This skill can be activated 2 more times before triggering the cooldown. This is obviously super great because we're constantly going to be impaling enemies, and having the more impales is good. Impale has actually become one of my more favorite abilities just for the fact that it synergizes really well with one of the skill nodes in the bottom tree for Devastator. And the second skill we're going to be using is Tier 3 mod, Double Jump for Gravity Leap. Skill can be used twice before triggering the cooldown. Now this gives us another activation of Double Jump of our Gravity Leap, so that we're able to actually help synergize that really well with another ability we're using. Next, we're using the Seismic Commander Armor. This one is Anomaly, Status Power, and Cooldown Reduction. We have the Tier 3 mod, Palisade. Impale. This skill can be strike 2 additional targets. This is really great because whenever we have like a big horde of enemies in front of us, 2 of them are able to get impaled at the same time. This is obviously going to help thin out the herd in front of us, and also obviously just do more damage. And also we get passive healing from Impale as well, so that's going to help scale with it as well. And the second one we have is Extra Quake Earthquake. The skill can be activated 1 more time before triggering the cooldown. More Earthquake is really great. Earthquake is probably Devastator's best ability overall, not only because it has damage, but also because we're able to get good skill Life Leech from it, and also it has a great mod for inflicting bleed over a large area. Next is the Seismic Commander Leg Armor. This one is Anomaly, Status Power, and Cooldown Reduction with Tainted Blood, the Tier 3 mod. Increase the damage dealt to enemies afflicted with bleed by 25%. This is huge for us because we're going to be adding an extra 25% damage to enemies that are inflicted by a bleed. On this build currently, we don't have that Bloody Boost mod, which is a Tier 2. So this is able to essentially kind of take over that spot and make sure that we're doing some extra damage. And also we have Rivers of Blood, Impale. Increase the skill's damage by 50% to enemies afflicted with bleed. Obviously, we're going to be intentionally trying to inflict bleed to all the enemies in front of us, so being able to do more damage, whether it's a Broodmother all the way down to the lowest rank and file, we're going to be doing a lot more damage. Next is Seismic Commander Gloves. We have max health, status power, and skill life leech. When it comes to that shard right there, the max health, I would absolutely change that out if I could. This is actually a suggestion I'd really make to the developers is let us get random rolls on legendaries. I not only think that would help kind of expand our use of the skill, but also just the fact it will just make legendaries kind of feel more random and cool. But we also have a Sunder on it. Earthquake, using the skill permanently reduces the armor of afflicted enemies by 20%. And then we also have Bloodshot. Earthquake, inflict bleed on enemies damaged by the skill. Now, first off, the Sunder one is really great because using the skill, taking away armor from enemies, that makes them more physically vulnerable. So again, we have this other skill that's a tier 1 mod that takes 33% away from them for 5 seconds. But this is going to just be a permanent reduction of armor to our enemies. And then also Bloodshot, obviously, again, I mentioned we want to use Earthquake to inflict bleed on our enemies, and this will do it for us. Finally, we have the Seismic Commander's Foot Gear. This one has max health, status power, and skill life leech. And we have second Quake on it. Earthquake, the skill can be activated one more time before triggering the cooldown. This is going to be just another mod that's going to give us an extra use of Earthquake. Again, being our best skill, we want to use it as much as we humanly can. And then finally, that tier 3 mod, Despair. Gravity Leap. Enemies within a damage radius of Gravity Leap receive a 1.5 times more anomaly damage for 5 seconds. I have a video covering all of this over here on my YouTube, but do know that this is going to be really great for that bottom tree for anomaly damage. We're going to high anomaly damage in that tree, so the more we do, the better. Anomaly damage is going to come from our skills, our melee, so a lot of things that we're constantly using on this build, it's going to help benefit it. And we're mainly going to use this on those bigger enemies, such as Broodmothers, Behemoths, or even Captains. They're going to take more anomaly damage from things like our Shadow Comet or our Scrap Grenade that we're using on our Juggler. Skills that we're using, obviously Earthquake releases Shockwave, dealing 64,000 damage and interrupts all enemies in front of you. Impale, select a target to interrupt their skills, inflict bleed, and deal 128,000 damage. The damage is lethal. The enemy will be impaled, granting a powerful bonus to armor and health regeneration to allies for 9 seconds, to all allies for 9 seconds. Now that's going to affect you as well. And again, this is where it's kind of great for those like trash mobs on the ground, impaling them especially, because we're just going to get free health and armor from that, as well as be able to help out teammates if we are going in co-op play. Now, at the recording of this video, the inventory wipes have been fixed, so you will be able to go into your game and play with friends now without having to worry about it crashing and then losing all your inventory. You are now good to go. And then finally, we have Gravity Leap. Leap into the air and strike your targets from above, dealing 85,000 damage, interrupting enemies with a small radius of the area you land in. This is great for mobility, for damage all around. And again, using that Despair mod, debuffing enemies, making sure that they're getting more anomaly damage. Now, in our bottom skill tree, we're going obviously all into these anomaly reservoirs, getting that 6% boost to anomaly power. There's 5 of those total, so a total of 30% extra anomaly power. We're going to both these Endless Tremors. Seismic skill cooldown is reduced by 15%. We're using 2 seismic skills, that being Earthquake and Impale, so getting that extra 30% reduction to their cooldowns is very good. We're using Perpetual Motion, reduce kinetic skills cooldown by 15%. That is Gravity Leap, so getting a faster cooldown on that, always great. Using both these pure anomalies, increase your resistance piercing by 15%. There's 2 of those, so 30% extra resistance piercing. This is going to help you strip through enemies that are trying to block damage in whatever way it might be. Absolute must for this tree. We're using Stone Circle, extend the distance considered to be close range by an additional 4 meters. This is great because whether we're impaling an enemy from a long distance or hitting an earthquake, it'll increase the distance that we can get that healing from our natural skill tree here. Again, as Devastator, you'll receive health from slain enemies that stood too close, that being in that close area. We're also using Anomaly Bullets, increase firepower by 15% of your anomaly power. We have pretty high anomaly right now, so getting just a bit of a damage boost to our weapon is always great. Executioner is that one that I said really synergizes well with Impale. Increase damage by 20% against enemies below 30% of health. I almost essentially, anytime an enemy is at that 30%, if they're more that mid-range to below rank and file, they are going to get immediately impaled and take a lot of damage, especially if they're bleeding, being in combination with that Impale bleed mod we have. Bloodbath. Bleed afflicted on enemies deals 30% more damage. This is obviously great because we have 2 of these, so an extra 60% of damage to bleeded targets is always advantageous for us. Again, constantly inflict bleed across the battlefield. You'll be able to constantly regen health, especially because of this skill, Blood Donation. You're healed at 25% of your bleed damage. Now, I've had people come to my stream and be like, oh, I'm using top tree, I'm using mid tree, all this other stuff. It's going so well. I'm able to do all this stuff. I'm like, okay, are you able to like do CT15? Well, no, I can do CT15. I'm like, okay, well, do you gold it? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, that's because essentially we're kind of having to min-max on this bottom tree because Anomaly is much stronger than Firepower. So those other trees, I just don't feel like really do it for us. And also, we just don't really get a whole lot of healing out of those, even with something like the statue set. The statue set's kind of bugged right now, apparently, too. It doesn't really give your teammates that extra boost to their weapon leech or their damage. So right now, again, this bottom tree is everything it needs to be for you. Protected by the Anomaly, increase your armor bonus by 40% of your Anomaly power. Always great. Higher armor, better. You're going to be less damage you're going to be taken from physical attacks. Rejuvenation, increase your skill leech by 6%. That's going to help out literally any skill we're using, especially Earthquake, where we're going to be inflicting a wide range of damage to enemies. Skilled Sentry, increase armor by 20% and resistances by 20% for 10 seconds when your skill ends. This is always great because we're constantly activating abilities, so we're constantly keeping up the extra armor and resistances. And then finally, Earth's Heritage, increase seismic skills base damage by 50%. That's going to help out our Earthquake and our Impale. Now, here's the issue. I don't know if this is getting that full 50%. I've done some testing and gotten some pretty inconsistent numbers. I would love for somebody in the comments to let me know if they've done some extra testing, if they can confirm this. But I don't think this is doing all that extra 50% damage. And even if it is, I think it needs to go up more, closer to 75, especially again, we only get 20 points. This is a capstone. Capstones need to be viable. And only getting 50% extra damage is just, it's just like, okay, you know, like it needs to be a little bit more, personally to me. Now, let's say like you don't have all these tier 3 mods, you're not really able to work off of those and use those extra boosts that they essentially give you. What can you use to essentially substitute for that until you get there? Well, first off, for Earthquake, obviously, I think the bleed is a must. I think the extra quake is a must, but something like ground crush is always gonna be good. Extra damage is always valuable. I really don't think heal per kill is all that worth it because half the time, a lot of the anomaly damage you're doing is doing more of it. And that extra 10% of max health isn't really all that viable. But I do think armor boost is an absolute must if you're leveling up. Grants 4,972 points of armor for each enemy afflicted by the skill. Effect lasts for 8 seconds and stacks to 10 times. You're, again, constantly inflicting this over a large area. So more armor, the better. You're going to be a lot more of that tanky character and be able to mitigate a lot less damage. Earth's Legacy, people like this one a lot. Increase the range. It's always going to be good to get a little bit more range, especially for those far out enemies. But personally, I don't think it's all that viable, just purely out the fact that you're supposed to be the tank. You're supposed to be in the forefront. You're going to hit those enemies regardless. And even if you don't, you can just use something like Gravity Leap, shoot up in the air, hit the enemy from a far distance. It's really not all that needed. And then finally, Panzer Drain, that can kind of go in for that Asunder. Damaging enemies with this skill steals 33% of their armor, and the effect lasts for 5 seconds. Again, this is kind of that Asunder light. You're able to strip armor, do damage, and move on to the next enemy. For Gravity Leap, Human Comet, extra damage is always going to be viable. Inflicting Bleed is going to be something really great as well. You are essentially getting 2 skills, though, already, that being Impale and Earthquake, that are going to essentially immediately inflict Bleed. So this won't be as needed, but if you're really just noticing that you're just needing to inflict Bleed across the battlefield, sure, go for this. But Life Absorption would be the one I'd say the most that you need. Heal for 15% of the damage dealt. If your target dies, heal for 30% of that damage. That's always super great because even just one singular hit, you're going to heal for most of that damage done. For Impale, Vlad's Grass, extra 25% range. That's pretty nice. I would say the Impaler is an absolute must. Can be activated more times before triggering the cooldown. More uses of it is just going to be more damage you're going to be inflicting. Rivers of Blood, that's the one where I'd say is an absolute must just because extra damage to bleed inflicted enemies, which you're already doing constantly, is going to be very advantageous for you to do. Sharpened Spike, extra damage is cool. Spike Forest, that can strike an extra foe. That's always great as well. Kind of take that place, that other one that we have, that tier 3, where it's able to hit another enemy. And then finally, Restoration. Impale enemies generate 5% health regen bonus for all the players. This one can be really great if you're noticing you're constantly lower on health with like giant mobs attacking you. But at the same time, you're already going to get health regen from those spikes as is. So it's not exactly needed, but it wouldn't be too terrible to have. Thank you so much for stopping by this video. Again, this is going to be something that's going to get you CT15 gold soloing for most expeditions. I've been able to do it for Colosseum, the Palace, and also Archways of Enoch. There's some other ones where I can kind of min-max a little bit better, just pretty much based off my weapons, and know I can make those times. Things like Chem Plant and even Boomtown, I've gotten really close on that one as well. But again, weapons are what's holding me back right now. If you got something like a Thunderbird, absolutely use it. Death Shield, Air of the Desert, use this build with it and you will be able to do everything. That is, again, the only thing that's really holding me back on that front. But do know that we're gonna have some more build videos coming out here soon. I'm gonna have some more other theory videos. Make sure you check out my video where I'm talking about what changes I think need to be done to Devastator to help kind of push them to that higher forefront like the other 3 characters. And also, again, just support the channel by hitting that subscribe button. We just hit YouTube partner. It's so awesome. I'm so excited. And I really appreciate everyone who's been watching these videos and really supporting. Do let me know if you have any ideas about certain things that are working, not working within the skill trees. I would love to know them so that I'm able to test them out myself and we can kind of make those obvious to the developers to be fixed later down the road. Regardless, find me on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok, all at Birdman778. Again, streaming every day at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Stopping by. I appreciate you guys. Have a great night, day, or whatever it may be.